most of my work gets done here.
We are live.
Yeah.
All right, Black Box Radio. We are in the box. It is the sixth voice of seven, and we're in the BMoreBLaK Series. It's our series that we started as an answer to National Black History Month, which is February. So we wanted to really highlight our platform, living history in Baltimore, and Black folks who are doing amazing things in their space and in their capacity. And that's what the BMoreBLaK series is. My name is Queen. I am a host at Black Box Radio. We are a media platform illustrating Black excellence. We platform Black people. We expose Black genius, and we disseminate information to the community at large and the Black community, of course. So we're unapologetically Black. Uh, we talk Black stories. We platform Black people. We do Black. That's what we do over here. So we started this series, and it has been fire. I'm telling you guys, absolute fire. This is the sixth voice. We had Sabrina Harris. We had Juan Nance. We had Monica Williams. We had Eric Jackson, and we have Big Mike from the Rich program. Check it out. It's all on YouTube. Please subscribe to our website. That's blackboxradio.com, and also to our YouTube channel, and that's Black Box Space Radio. So tonight we have brother David Fakunle. Fakunle. Let me get it right. Welcome to the box, bro. Say hi to the people.
What's good, people? Thank you for having me, Queen.
You're very, very welcome. So, first things first, brother David. We're gonna jump into what you do in the community because you're a community steward. You're doing so much. So, but first thing we're going to talk about is like, where you from? Where you repping? Where was your face in the space? So, where you from? You know, what high school you went to? That type of thing.
Oh man, okay, so we're going there. So I
Yeah,
born, raised, and still live in East Baltimore. So I'm on the beach side of Baltimore City.
love it.
High school, I went to the Friends School of Baltimore.
All
I did
right.
that from sixth grade all the way through high school, and then after that, went to the University of Maryland, College Park, and that's where I began to find this journey that I'm now on. So, like I was telling you, Queen, if it was up to me, 18-year-old David thought he was going to be an aerospace engineer, working for Boeing in the Seattle area, making passenger aircraft. That
Wow.
was my dream. When I got to Maryland and started to take the prerequisite courses for aerospace engineering, I quickly found out that was not my forte. Busted my ass to pass chemistry. I think I got a C or a C plus, and I withdrew from physics twice. And that was the point that I realized I wasn't going to be an aerospace engineer. It was a conversation, a very intimate conversation with my father that allowed me to pursue my skills and to pursue things that I enjoyed. And at that time, I enjoyed talking with people, and that certainly comes from being a showman throughout my life. My mother will tell you, and my skills as a storyteller, which was cultivated under Mary Carter Smith, peace be upon her, as well as Baba Bunjo Butler, many
Mm,
of the elders of the National Association of Black Storytellers and the Griot Circle of Maryland specifically.
wow.
So I like talking with people, and I like analyzing their circumstances, their lives, and providing some suggestions that could be beneficial. Now, mind you, this was during the early to mid 2000s. This was the wild west of the internet. You didn't know who the hell you were talking to. You found ways to connect with people genuinely. I certainly did. So
Yep.
when they were who they said they were, I still wanted to have a connection, and people opened up to me. So I identified this as a talent that I had, and I figured, well, why not get paid for it? So that's what shifted me to psychology, and I also decided to do criminology and criminal justice at Maryland. And ultimately, that's where I found research. And it wasn't at Maryland; it was at Rutgers University in New Jersey, through an instructor I had at a class in Maryland. And that was the first time I saw myself in social science research. I
Mm,
thought it was strictly bench science. I thought it was for nerds and geeks, and I was neither one of those, and that it had nothing to do with me. But and this is why the beauty of life is what it is. You know who allowed this black kid from East Baltimore to see himself in social science research?
who?
this like 6'4" white guy from the Midwest.
Whoa.
Right. So I part of the part of my experience is knowing who your allies are,
Mm.
what they can be. And yes, they may not necessarily understand all the circumstances of your life and your livelihood, but it doesn't mean they don't care. And it doesn't mean that they don't want the best for you. And
Yep. That's excellent.
this
And
was
that's what a teacher. That's what a
yeah,
teacher does. That's what
that's what real
teachers
teaching does,
do.
right?
Exactly.
Real teaching creates opportunities and
Absolutely.
activates possibility.
Absolutely.
So, that teacher, that professor, Dr. Andrew Peterson, did that for me. And that's what brought me back to my home. So with this particular research that I'm exploring, I'm thinking about, the 1300 block of North Potomac Street. I'm thinking
Mm.
about Preston Street and Federal Street, my area of East Baltimore, and thinking about all the places that you could buy tobacco and cigarettes from, and
Mm.
visualizing that it's everywhere because, well, that's the composition of East Baltimore. But if you go to another neighborhood, for example, the Roland Park area of Baltimore, which I did going to friends, I had plenty of friends who lived in Roland Park.
Okay.
You didn't see a lot of places that sold tobacco. You didn't see a lot of anything other than residential. What was
Absolutely.
there for retail was very limited, right?
Right.
So those stories and experiences were now showing themselves in research,
Mm.
statistics, and going into previous publications about this same topic. And with that guidance and with what I learned from Project Learn, which was a program at Rutgers, and it was attuned to students of color, primarily Black students, and encouraging Black undergraduates to consider social science research because they knew there was a significant lack of Black researchers.
Mm.
It is, right?
Duh.
In social sciences like public health, and I'll get to public health eventually.
Okay.
So a light bulb went off, and again, I saw myself in this research for the first time in my life, and I was hooked. I wanted to do it, and that program was an 8-week boot camp that turned us into, I would say, above competent researchers in 8 weeks. I mean, that's how
Wow.
intense it was. But looking at the history of Project Learn, no longer in existence, which I think is an absolute shame. You look at the 25 plus year history of that program, and again, always attune to students of color, bringing them into social science. If you look at the history of that program, almost over 25 years, I can absolutely say 90+% of the students that went through that program got an advanced degree.
Wow.
Many of them got terminal degrees, and we're talking PhDs, we're talking MDs, we're talking PsyDs, we're talking PharmDs, JDs, right? It created some beast in the social
Whoa.
science world, right? That was the point, right? That
Yes.
was the causality. And in research, we talk about correlation and causality. Correlation is just a relationship. Cause is this led to that.
Mm-hmm.
And that program was the cause of so many young people of color even considering research, let alone becoming elite at it. And I brought those skills back to Maryland, and I came back with a new focus on what I wanted to do. I wanted to research, and my interest in research was me. It was my life. It was understanding that being a young Black man born and raised in East Baltimore, primarily in the 90s and the 2000s,
Okay.
I was very aware of the circumstances that were not conducive to health and well-being. I didn't necessarily call it health and well-being. It was always talking about, don't stand on the corner, don't go to prison, don't die.
Wow.
Right? I
That's
knew those
it.
were things to avoid, right?
Yep.
In Baltimore. And the way that I was able to avoid them was of all the opportunities that I had academically, culturally, spiritually, economically in certain ways. So all these things that in many cases I had to do, but all these things that kept me busy and constantly exposed me to something else.
Yes.
So I was fortunate to travel to Africa. My father's an immigrant from Nigeria. So I have family in Nigeria. I've been able to go there and be with them for a time. Uh, I traveled across the United States. I was able to travel to other countries in the world. These were all the things that were part of my life. They're normal for me, and in retrospect, how critical they were to unlocking possibilities and potentials. So bringing this all back to Maryland, I wanted to understand what systemically, if anything, allowed those things to happen, and could I create opportunities for other people, particularly other Black men like me?
Yeah.
Because I recognized very early on that I was a unicorn. There were many
Whoa.
spaces that I was in, people like me weren't in. I was
Wow.
the one or the
One.
few, right? And
Wow.
I'm comfortable with that now. But being in middle school and high school is weird, but it was true. I was among the few, so I knew there was something about my journey that allowed me to be the one or the few, and I
Mm.
truly didn't think it was just because it was my life. There were things that could be extracted from my story that could be applied to other people's stories if done at the right time. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I wanted to understand scientifically. So graduated from Maryland with my bachelor's, and because I wasn't ready for grad school, I worked. So I worked at a consulting firm in Virginia, and eventually moved on to Social Security. Well, fired from the first job, got a new job at Social Security, which brought me closer back to Baltimore. The other job was in Virginia, closer to DC. It was not fun.
Mm-hmm.
And all the while, I was trying to figure out what path to take for grad school. Got the chance to talk to many academics, professors, researchers
Okay.
in the Maryland area, all Black. And I told them my story. I told them, this is what I want to do. Where should I do it? And it was getting all different types of answers, all different types
Wow.
of recommendations and suggestions, which was great. But I didn't need suggestions. I needed someone to tell me what to do.
Wow.
It was like being at a great restaurant and there's so many good things on the menu.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah.
Of all places, yes, okay, thank you. Of all places, Johns Hopkins University, the School of Public Health, they'll tell you, best in the world. There was a Black woman, a professor, Deborah Furholden, who, when I met with her, first and foremost, it was a shock because she didn't look anything like her professional photo on the website. She was definitely much more natural. So that was an initial shock.
Okay.
And contrary to, I think, all the other professionals that I spoke with, she was direct. She told me what I needed to do. And this is what she said after I told her my story. You need to get a PhD in public health and you need to get a master's in social work. And I said, okay, that's what I'm going to do. So my choice,
Well, that's what she told you?
because she told me to. Because I
Wow.
needed. I needed someone of her stature, of her gravitas, where
Yes.
even though she was a stranger to me, I didn't really know who she was, other than she was a Black woman. Um, a level of, yeah, I think that was what I was going to listen to anyone who's going to give me that direct a response, because a lot of professors, and this is just the nature of what we do. We don't necessarily want to say anything definitively. We say it could be this, it could be that. You can consider this or consider that. She was the only one that told me this is what you need to do. Is what I needed to hear, and I said okay. And in retrospect, she was absolutely right. I didn't get the master's in social work. I got the PhD in public health from Johns Hopkins. She was my first advisor.
What was your master's in? What's your master's in?
I didn't get a master's. I didn't get a master's. So one of the beautiful things about public health, and a lot of people don't know this,
Wow.
you don't have to get a master's in order to get the PhD.
Amazing.
All right.
Amazing.
In social work, you do. So to get a PhD in social work, you must get a master's in social work. But to get a PhD in public health, you don't necessarily need a master's in public health. Most people will get that master's because, of course, it's 1 to 2 years. It's a valuable degree. So there are a lot of masters that don't mean squat, unfortunately. For example, like a master's in psychology. Uh, there's not so much you can do with a master's in psychology. You can do something with a PhD in psychology or a PsyD, but the master's doesn't really afford you too many opportunities. In public
Mhm.
health, the MPH does. A lot of people go on to various forms of public health work with the
Exactly.
MPH or the MHS. And
Yeah.
then if you decide, you can then, contribute another 2, 3 more years tops and get a PhD. Once I learned that I could just jump to the PhD, I'm like, cool, there you go. That's all I want to do. So, the next 4 years of my life was set. Didn't know how it was going to go. And it definitely didn't meet any anticipations that I had. But it was an incredible journey that laid the foundation for all the things I think that I'm doing today. Um, and I'll put that in context. The commitment to community was something lifelong.
Okay.
I'm a product of the National Great Blacks in Wax Museum. It was founded by my godparents, Dr. Joanne Martin and the late Dr. Elmer Martin.
Mm-hmm.
My mother helped them with their traveling exhibition when they would go around to churches and malls or schools
Wow.
with the original 4 wax figures. She would have one of the wax figures in her house. This was before I was born.
Wow.
So she was also a lifelong um, servant of the people. And she credits so much to Dr. Elmer, who was chair of social work at Morgan State University.
Yep.
Again, fast forward, life happens the way it does. I'm now a professor at Morgan State University. Um,
Yes.
right, right. Um,
I
and
love all of that. I'm a graduate of Morgan State University, so
yeah, no
let's
doubt.
go.
And I
Let's
and I
go.
and I and I chose Morgan very intentionally for a lot of reasons, and very quickly. Number one, it's 5 minutes away from my house. I love that. Number two, it's a state school, which means I get a hard salary. I don't necessarily have to worry about getting funding in order to pay myself. A lot of institutions do not operate that way. But as a state institution, you get your money and you
Mm,
keep it moving. I love that. I
I
love the
didn't know that.
Yep,
Okay.
yep. Hard money and soft money is what they call it. This is the academic
Got it. So they hard money. Got it.
hard money, soft money. Three, it's a HBCU, and I will admit, in my life growing up, I was, I think, conditioned to be somewhat bougie about institutions. My parents certainly didn't want me to be in Baltimore City Public Schools just because of the challenges there.
Just
So
because of Baltimore City Public Schools, a mess.
yeah, I mean, and that was their perspective. I mean, I know there are great schools within the system. We know that overall the system has some fundamental flaws, and we could
Yes.
spend
It's broken.
plenty of time on that. But nevertheless, I think there was this, and this was despite, and that's the interesting dynamic. So both my parents went to Morgan, right? They met at
Whoa.
Morgan, so they both have HBCU experience. And it's not that it was like unanimous, but there was always kind of this shift, like go to the PWIs, a predominantly white institution. That's where we know that education is top notch, right? You'll
Yeah.
get everything you need to learn in order to be successful in the world. So I get it, right? That's the reality in many cases. So for me, I'm like, okay, well, let me aim for the PWIs and stay away from the HBCUs. That's clearly something that I shouldn't be a part of. But as I got older, this was where the importance of context really, I think, grew for me.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about so many of my colleagues and friends who went to HBCUs and they aren't remembering the classes, right? They're talking about the experience
The
of being in an
experience.
institution where everyone looked like you. And as someone who was not used to that, in many of my, I'll say, day spaces, right? I think my
Mm-hmm.
night spaces, yes, that's when I was with Sankofa Dance Theater. That was when I was with Woundward Productions, which I still am.
Mm-hmm.
That was when I was with the National Great Blacks and Wax Museum. But during the day, I was with the white folks in a lot of sense. So, certainly having that balance was helpful and protective,
Yes.
against not losing myself. And I always give credit to my parents, especially my mother, for keeping us involved and pushing us into this, that, and the third. Didn't want to do it because it was taking away all my free time, but I get it. It helped. um, but being there now, being there a professor now there, and certainly one of the things that I emphasize is the context and
Yep.
the importance of that understanding of experience that for a young black person, certainly in the United States of America, being at an institution of higher learning where yes, you can get all the skills and abilities and connections and networks
Yep.
that allow you to be successful, excuse me, and also be and do that in a space of contextual understanding, at least to some fundamental extent. It's not a guarantee for everybody. I certainly am not naive, but there's something about being around your own.
There's
It
something
doesn't have
about
to.
it.
It doesn't have to be spoken. And I think a lot of things for Black folks aren't spoken.
Yep.
They are understood, right?
I understood.
So for me, being again being at Morgan now, I get that from this perspective. I know I didn't have it as a student, but as faculty and certainly in the professional spaces that I occupy, I truly embrace the importance of context. And my context is unapologetically Black. And I appreciate the exposure to perspectives and cultures not of my own. And what I'm grateful for is that likewise they appreciate the exposure and understanding of cultures not of their own. So when it's a mutually beneficial exchange, it's great.
Yeah, it is. It
When
is. But
it's
that
forced,
HBCU experiences,
right? When it's forced, right, it's problematic. Right,
yeah, it's problematic. HBCUs, it changed my life.
right.
Absolutely. The experience changed my life. I think education can be actually incorporated anywhere, actually. You can
Mm-hmm.
be educated in any arena, but to be educated in that arena with Black people around your culture, your movement, people who have lived experiences just as you, who are you, and teachers who are pouring into you and really care about your outcome. It
Mm-hmm.
changed my actual life.
No
Uh,
doubt, no
and
doubt.
yeah, and so I tell folks is you go to any school and do whatever you want, but something about the HBCU when you're Black,
Mm-hmm.
something about it. You can't even put your hand on it, but it's special. And I didn't go to the PWI, so I don't really know how that feeling is. But I know the feeling that I got from being at a HBCU, and I definitely recommend it to any young Black kid.
Yep, no doubt, no doubt.
Real talk, real talk, real talk. So I'm glad I like you even more. You teaching at my alma mater.
Yeah.
We're real cool right now. We're cooler than a fan.
Hey, well, teaching is something I've always liked. I
Hmm.
knew the way I wanted to navigate academia was with a teaching orientation. Like as soon as this is done, I got a class to get ready for. So 2 classes I got to get ready for. So I love guiding more than teaching. I'll say that too, because
Wow.
one thing that I learned, especially being a professor, yes, there may be things about the field that you know, but the biggest thing that a professor is, compared to their students, is just a better student. We just learn better. We learn faster. We learn more holistically than those who we now have to help guide in their learning.
Yes.
For my student, and I tell my students this: I don't know everything. I don't have the energy to know everything, but I know where to find things. That's what makes me a researcher. That we find stuff. So if you give me a topic, I'll look it up. I'll figure it out. I'll verify that it's factual, and then I'll say, "Here you go. Here's what you need to know." So having that skill, I think, is probably one of the biggest things I learned with all the learning that I've had, especially getting up to the level of a PhD.
Yes.
You just got to be a good student, right? Know where to find things and know how to coalesce all the information that is out there, because there's so much that you could possibly know, but how much of it is actually valuable and how much of it is
Mm.
actually relevant? We struggle with this now more than ever, and
What's
these
valuable? What's
yeah,
relevant?
these days
Smartphone.
make a
Yeah.
huge difference, because we have all the information that we could ever want to know at the palm of our hand,
Absolutely.
with computing power that is far exceeding what took us to the moon, right?
Absolutely.
Like
Far feeding.
we're
Yeah.
there. We're at that point of access to just stuff. So when you have seemingly the world of information in the palm
Wow.
of your hand, and
Hmm.
my son has a better phone than I do. He's an 8. What do you learn? What is there to learn?
Yeah.
And
What's valuable? Yeah.
what there is to learn is thinking critically and
Mm.
being able to parse out information and understanding the context by which that information was generated and presented. This is what researchers know. This is what we go, those extra 4 or 5 years to learn, is how to think with that depth of, you know, uh, critical reflection,
Hmm.
thinking about how the information was generated, how the information was presented, the perspective of those who generated the information, all this context, right? This is
Hmm.
all breaking down context and the minutia in which it exists, and getting some clearer, I won't say clearer understanding of how this world works.
Yes.
And in my case of public health, how it works for the people who navigate this world and their health and well-being. And the answer is, it's everything everywhere all at once. But there are
Wow.
some common denominators that can benefit the collective in their holistic healing.
Hmm. Wow, that's heavy. That's
This
heavy.
is where I live. this is this is ingredient.
that's that's where you live. You live in the heavy part of the world.
I do. I live here, which is why when I'm not working, I want to do the most mindless stuff
Okay.
possible, because I get paid to think, and as you see, I get paid to think very deeply. That gets burdensome at times.
Yeah, I'm sure that's really heavy, and that's why we're gonna get lighter. But that
Yeah.
that's that's super heavy. So let me ask you a question, Baltimore. Like
Mhm.
the city that we live in, we see
Yeah.
so many, we see a lot of changes as we see in all inner cities, the
Hmm.
demographics, the way that money is being distributed in the city.
Hmm.
They're building up a lot of commercial, and
Hmm.
then once the commercial's built, then we see homes that most of us can't afford,
Hmm.
and plan neighborhoods that we are not being planned to be in. When I
Hmm.
say that, as Black people,
Oh yeah.
and so being a researcher and also having this dichotomy of having a credible amount of violence in the city, unfortunately, and chaos in the inner city schools. What's going to heal our Baltimore?
Oof.
And your mindset. What do you think would heal our Baltimore?
It has to be an economic investment. It has to be structural reimagination. It
Mm,
has to be more intentional cultural context,
mm,
and there has to be an explicit social, emotional, spiritual healing. And I know you understand. Spiritual, not religious.
hmm.
You can pray to whoever you need to pray. The point is that you have a connection with something greater than yourself.
Absolutely.
It can be God, it can be Allah, it can be Jah, Jehovah, Olodumare. Don't care. Just have it.
Just have it.
Um, this is where I say storytelling can be so valuable. Certainly in the last one, because having a space to share your truth, whatever it can be,
Hmm.
is one of the ways that you cultivate that social, emotional, spiritual healing. It doesn't necessarily have to be intentional, other than the intentionality of telling the story. You don't have to necessarily be focusing on that which is greater than yourself. I think telling the story will help you to some extent think of something greater than you, at least in that moment, right? Because the story is uh, can look at the totality of your journey. And again, this is where I live. I live in this constant reflection of where I was,
Hmm.
where I am now, and because of that distance of time, I can understand why my life makes so much sense today. It didn't make sense in my 20s. I say that very, very clearly and very demonstratively. My life wasn't clear to me in my 20s. It wasn't clear to me in my teens. It's clear to me in my 30s. Like, I know that this path I'm on makes so much sense. And all those things that seemed random back then, it's like a constellation, right? If you know where the constellation, the stars have their alignment, and if you don't know where it is, they're just randomly placed in the cosmos.
This is, yeah. I mean, and then what you're saying is so pivotal because our young people are not getting to the space where they can mature to find out who they are. You understand? They're not getting to 30,
Hmm.
because like you said, in your teens and in your 20s, you didn't know who you were.
Hmm.
It took you a while to get here, and they're not even having the chance, some of
Yeah,
them,
and and,
unfortunately.
and you're right, and that's where the cultural context, the economic, the healthy economic investment, that's where the structural reimagination has to happen.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm. Can
I
you
was
break down what structural reimagination? Can you give me a little of what you mean by
Yeah. So, in simplest terms, the built environment makes a difference.
that? Mm,
The configuration of buildings and roads and passageways, the
the
blocks that people,
stores,
yeah, all
yeah,
that
all of
is
that.
designed, and there's enough evidence that different configurations of a built environment are more or less conducive to health, better health. good health, quality health. So when we talk about green space, doesn't necessarily mean, and I can say this, I live near Heron Run Park. I'm not in the park much at all right now because of how busy I am, but I love knowing that the trees are there.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's enough for me, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
maybe as it warms up, I'll walk in the forest and I'll ride my
You have
bike.
options. You have that option.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So even that is conducive to my health. We know that there are many spaces, and we can speak to Baltimore. There are many spaces within the city that lack something as impactful as green space. And it doesn't
Absolutely.
mean that every single person is going to find themselves in the green space, but even just knowing it's there is
And
healthy.
then what it does for the environment with green space and how it
Of course.
filters air
Oh
and
yeah, I mean, yeah, from an
from an
environment
ecology and
standpoint,
a biological standpoint,
yeah, that goes
Mhm.
without saying. I
Exactly.
think people understanding just again what that presence can do for your mental and emotional health.
Absolutely.
That's where we're now starting to marry the two importances, right? Of course,
Yep.
Mother Earth is important. Like we get that part, and now we're starting to more so embrace how Mother Earth is important for us, right? And
We
how
need
I
her.
exactly it goes both ways, right?
It's reciprocal.
It goes
We
both
have to respect that piece, and you're right. In these concrete jungles, there's no space, there's no habitation, there's no green
exactly.
space. Yeah.
Um, one of my good friends, when he talks, he often references a study that was done on rats, and
Mm.
what it was there was one set of rats that were in this open space with the way he puts it, all the food, drink, and sex they could want. There was another group of rats that had none of those opportunities and none of those things that were conducive to their health. Both sets of rats were giving a vial of a drug that they could take whenever they wanted. It was right there whenever they wanted to have it. As you can imagine, the group of rats with all the food, space, water, and sex that they wanted, and I'm being rather
Yeah.
crass, but you understand my point.
Yeah.
You never touched the drug. They didn't need it. All right. The group of rats that had nothing but this tight space and no access to any other opportunities were lapping that drug up every chance they could get. So it was this researcher's example of how connection and openness and opportunity, even for other animals, is so critical to
It
how we
triggers
navigate life.
behavior. It triggers behavior.
Exactly.
Yes.
So you can take those same principles and apply it to humans.
Wow.
And again, we can wait on the sex thing, obviously at an appropriate time, but certainly the food and the water and the open space, we need that throughout the time course. Throughout
Yeah.
our life, we need
And,
that.
and to some degree, we need sex also, and not
Oh, no doubt.
not just.
Right.
Let's be clear.
Exactly. No,
Like,
no doubt.
yeah, sex is
Again,
not. It don't make it. It is a part of society. The
exactly.
human needs it. It is an expression that we need.
Oh,
So,
absolutely. And all I
yes,
say,
it's
right.
a
And
little
all I say
crass
is
to
at an
say all
appropriate
you
time,
want,
right? But yes, get yours when you're supposed to get yours.
but you're supposed to get that
Do it safely. Yes, and do it safely. That's
and
all
do
I
it safely.
so yeah, so those aspects need to be if and it's always the if, right? If we really want the
Yes.
best for the citizens, the residents, the people, then these are things that we need to do. Now, I'm realistic. I am not saying raise all of Baltimore and then restructure it that way. It has to be done in bits and pieces, and it needs to be done within the realities of the people living there now. Like I was just on
But
a
you're rehabbing with the Baltimore the same way. They're coming into Baltimore. You're rehabbing. You're sometimes you're changing the fronts of buildings. You're actually these commercial spaces look one way when you buy them, and when you're done, they're modernized. They have a different look, a different presentation. The same way you do that, you can inhabit and put in green space. You can put in more grass. You can engineer it differently if you wanted to.
absolutely, and it's all about intentionality.
It's intent. That's it.
Like we know it can be done. We see the examples, and the
Absolutely.
question that I know many people, many residents of Baltimore ask themselves is to whose benefit,
Huh.
right? To whose
Huh.
benefit? So we can't ignore, and I don't ignore that we live in a capitalistic society. And let me say, I don't like toxic capitalism. And that's certainly where we are in
Mm-hmm.
today's society. I am not opposed to people earning what their skills warranted if
Yes,
it's fair for everyone to do that.
absolutely.
But we are so far removed from that possibility that we have to look at capitalism the way it presents itself today.
It's malicious.
It's toxic,
It's
right?
toxic.
The
Yes.
people who get there, some of them genuinely get there through their own blood, sweat, and tears and all that stuff. But it's once they get there that they literally close the opportunity off to anybody else. That's the problem that I have.
Yeah.
Like they beat the competition and then they try to eliminate the any future competition from happening. That's problematic.
Well, I
So
think because most of the people beating the competition has not really beat the competition. Because when
of course, it's all it's like, again, it's all contextual, right?
yeah,
So who even engages in the competition is a
thank you. You've never even engaged in competition.
right. And we have those examples again throughout history. Those who have, like you said, when you talk about young people, not having a chance to figure out what their potential is,
Exactly.
let alone manifesting said potential, and that is, I'm the prime example of that. A prime example. I won't say a prime
Mm-hmm.
example of that. My sister, by comparison, she was a straight shooter. She knew she wanted to be a medical doctor. When she got her undergrad, it was pre-med biology. She went to medical school. She's now in residency. She knew exactly what she wanted to do, and she followed the script.
And did.
Beginning to end. Me, on the other hand, there was no script. It really was. I had to explore all these different spaces,
Mm-hmm.
fail, understand whether I truly liked it, be exposed, through serendipity to all these other opportunities, and start to put the pieces together. And now that I have, I'm gonna venture to guess there are more kids like me out there than kids like my sister.
Absolutely.
I'm just gonna say that,
I'm
and
gonna venture with you. I
right,
put
and God
100
bless
on
my
your
sister, right? She's the smarter one of us too. I have no problem saying
part.
that. And I envy her for having that. Like she knew. Like I'm
Yeah.
sure there was a piece that she had with the direction she wanted to take in life, and she's following it, and I love her. Me, yeah, I had to be a little bit more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So having that space where people can find their path, and that doesn't mean that everybody will, right? This is not a utopia, but this is again a showing that more people just have the chance. Because with more people having a chance, I truly believe more people will. Right?
Mm-hmm.
They will manifest their possibilities. They will discover what their possibilities and capabilities are. And this is what storytelling has allowed me to experience is most people strive for good. Most people are good and exude their goodness more than than the opposite. If they aren't exuding their goodness, it's more so out of the circumstances in which they live, more so than this explicit decision to act opposite, you know what I mean, of
Mm-hmm.
that natural goodness.
Yep.
So to me, if people can have that part removed or certainly reduced
Yeah.
on a systemic level, you're going to have more productive people, you're going to have more impactful people, you're going to have more good people. And the fundamental question that I ask, many of the spaces that I'm in is that what we want?
Mm.
Baseline. Is
Because we
that
can do that, but is
because
that
we
what we want?
can?
That's
But
not the outcome I think we want. You know.
and that's the true conversation that we have to have with ourselves, and
Exactly.
it's it's okay to acknowledge that conversation can be difficult, right?
Right.
Like I look at my life for example, right before this, I got an offer to be a keynote speaker at this uh, conference in Seattle. Of course, I'm gonna go. It's Seattle. I've never been to Seattle. It's like it's coming full circle. Didn't I say I wanted to be an aerospace engineer working for Boeing?
In Seattle.
And right in the Seattle area, and now
Yeah.
the only way I got to Seattle is through storytelling.
Look at that.
How crazy is that? See?
Because you were manifesting, but you just wasn't in the right space yet.
Right, exactly,
That's
and
where it is.
I get that. And for me, the success that I've had, again, very grateful for it.
Mm-hmm.
The flip side is it keeps you very, very busy. um,
Yeah,
And it's,
I said that to you earlier. What we ask God for, we can't say, "Oh, I can't take it." This is what we ask.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
I'm certainly more than willing to bear the burden of being so of being, woe is me. Everybody wants to hear what I have to say. Yeah, in the micro, in the acute moment, yes, it can be a
Yes.
pain because it's like it's one more thing to do. It's I gotta do this. Yeah, right. It's one more thing to do. In the grand scheme, yeah, is what I'm supposed to do,
What you're supposed to do.
which is why I say yes. And
Hmm.
at the same time, I do recognize that for as much as people may want to hear what I have to say, may want to be involved in the things that I do, I'm not the only one. So the question becomes, do I want to continue to hoard all these opportunities for myself, which I clearly can. Like I acknowledge that I'm at the point where there's so much stuff that I'm doing, or and so many opportunities that come my way that I can hoard, right? And it's not necessarily that I have the energy and capacity to do all of it, but the people are coming to me. So I have right of first refusal, and I
Yep.
have to decide: do I want to refuse this? Um, Sometimes I need to refuse it, and it's as much about acknowledging my capacity or
Hmm.
lack thereof in that case, and also seeing what can be generated for other people.
Hmm.
And one of the recent examples is with BMore Productions, where I'm executive director. The project that we are now in our second year of doing, the Existential Determinants of Health Initiative. And this is a program in conjunction with Virtues Matter. It's in conjunction with Charm City Care Connection, Fulton Bank. We've had all these great partners and supporters of this holistic program for which arts and culture is the foundation, looking to address these various realms of health, all relevant to the overall healing that we all need,
Yep.
especially dealing with the manifestation of trauma.
Yes.
A lot of this was in my head. Uh, the logistics, the mechanisms, the ways that we wanted to approach this program, uh, being able to communicate that, and certainly learn from the initial team, a strong but mighty team,
Hmm.
and getting that first year done, which was incredible, and the impact that we had was beyond our imagination. Now going into year two and having the opportunity to bring other people into this space. A good friend of mine who I met back when I was in Baltimore Core, one of the first cohorts of that program, and a student who took my storytelling class at Johns Hopkins. Right, being able to see the opportunities and seeing where their skills that they demonstrated to me in various capacities could be beneficial to this work, but also beneficial to them. And doing that lovingly more than anything else, because that's what people did for me. I think that's the best explanation I can give. That's why I do it. I would be the biggest hypocrite in the world if I didn't create opportunities. Now being in the capacity to create opportunities, when I know
Hmm.
the only reason I'm here is because of the opportunities that people created for me. Yeah, it started with my parents by entering, bringing me into the world. It continued with the Doctors Martin, who had this institution where I learned what it truly meant to be black, all of the history, and
Oh
grew up
wow.
around all of that from birth. So even when I started, in the predominantly white institutions, I knew who I was, even if they didn't know. I knew, and not to say it was easy
And
every
that's the
day,
most important. That's
right,
the most
right.
important. Yeah.
There were days that weren't easy, and what I learned was that I could still be unapologetically black, and as I said, embrace other forms of humanity too, like not mutually exclusive. From Mary Carter Smith, that serendipitous moment when I was 9 years old, and she, I told the yellow ribbon, and she was there in the audience, and she was impressed, and took me under her gigantic wings, and taught me black storytelling. Right, the seeds,
The seed.
the seeds.
Hmm.
And with the Sankofa Dance Theater, learning African drumming and African dancing, and just really having this huge exposure to the performing arts of the African diaspora, leading to Woundward Productions, where we got the chance to tell the stories of being young and black in Baltimore and the public health issues that dictated our lives and our circumstances and our stories, and to do so in a way that was raw and truthful and honest to how we felt. Oh, it's a village.
It is.
It's multiple villages. It's a whole damn city.
It is.
Right? It's a whole city.
It is. It
And
is
I think that's
multiple hands in
and I
one
think
place.
that's why I love Baltimore so much,
Yeah.
because Baltimore is its people. You know what I mean?
It
The
is.
charm, like I tell people, and and they, at Hopkins, I was long the person that they asked to talk about Baltimore, right? Because I was a Baltimore guy. So, to new students who were considering coming to Hopkins, because of course
Sure.
they were worried about, oh, is it like the Wire? Oh, Freddie
Yeah.
Gray happened. I get it. Like, again, I get it. I understand. Um, and I told them, once you integrate yourself and kind of let Baltimore take over you and involve yourself in Baltimore, you'll understand why they call it the Charm City. Because the charm of Baltimore is its soul. Baltimore has soul, right?
So,
And you know,
woo.
I know this, and it's interesting traveling to other cities around the country. Like, I know the cities that give me Baltimore vibes: New Orleans and Detroit.
I haven't been to Detroit, but New Orleans. I went to
New Orleans is just the
Woo,
Baltimore
it's the water, the
of the South
food.
South, right? It's Baltimore. Okay,
It's Baltimore down south. Yeah.
so coming to this city, like, you understand, but it's the soul, because New Orleans has soul.
They
Like,
have
they generated
they
genres of
generate
soul,
the community.
soul music,
And
right? So
yeah,
yeah, it has soul, and
yeah,
that's what makes Baltimore what it is. And Baltimore is a city that, yes, in many ways, I think in its best ways, is driven by its people, and its people got soul.
you
Right,
better
black
know.
folks got soul, white folks got soul, Latino folks got soul, indigenous, like, soul. That's Baltimore. Baltimore has soul.
All day.
Um, and to me, that's what I know I need in my life, which is why I don't want to live anywhere else. I'll
Mm,
visit, I'll stay for residencies, but where my heart is Baltimore, and I didn't need to go anywhere else to really know that. Like, I knew. um
I love
and
Baltimore.
what I'm grateful for is that, and I said so much stuff when I was younger, and I didn't know if I would actually manifest it, but I have. Thank God. um I said I didn't need to go to any of those places, to have the opportunities that I've had. I'll bring them to Baltimore.
Yes.
And I have. All right. I've done that. And I continue to do that. So if people, people around the country, people around the world, if they want to hook up with me, gotta come to Baltimore.
You
Right.
gotta come to BMore.
Right. Like, that's part of the deal. Like, they know that's, and I think that's what I'm proudest of, knowing about the story that continues to grow about me. The one city, the only city that they will associate with me is Baltimore.
Listen, I love that because and this series has shown that everybody, bro, we love Baltimore. I mean, and people, like God, they always rapping Baltimore. It's just that type of city. Once you
Oh
get
yeah,
once it gets its tentacles in you,
yeah,
it's very hard to not
exactly.
love it.
And people who who were born and raised in Baltimore, and I noticed this, with what some of my old classmates.
Okay.
They would travel. They would move to other places. So many of them ended up coming back to Baltimore
And that
because
and,
it's home.
and I'm an implant, and I love Baltimore. You hear me?
Right,
It's an amazing city.
right,
It is, and you said something that was so poignant. You said when you come here and you get and you get into the city, you
hmm
feel the charm.
yep,
That's where the charm city comes from, and it has soul. That is so
exactly.
true. That
It's
is so true. That
hmm
right there is like the epitome of be more. But
yeah,
anyway,
for
that's
sure.
the epitome. We'll stay there forever. So let's talk about some of this community work you're doing. And I love my mama Kay and my mama Rashid. I love Womb Work Productions. I love what you guys are doing. I love the empowerment in West Baltimore and doing with community. Tell us a little about your community work.
Oh, well, you mentioned it, BMore Productions. I started there back in 2001 as a performer, and
Mm.
I still perform, in a lesser capacity because I spend more time being, executive director. So it's about helping to run the organization and grow the impact of one work, and that's one of the things I'm proudest of. You One work has always been small but mighty. So many young people have come through that organization who have strengthened their artistic and cultural talents, who have been exposed and really embraced the stories of the African diaspora, and the importance of that context and how we navigate this world, how we navigate
Hmm.
Baltimore, right?
Right.
And being able to teach those skills of the performing arts and to teach virtues, embracing your social emotional health, the goodness of your humanity, it's always been impactful, right? It's always been what so many communities and neighborhoods and people need. And One Work is now in a place where it can truly support those who have done that for so long and create opportunities and show that being a creative being a creative oriented towards health and well-being pays, right? It
It
pays. You
pays.
can do good.
Yeah.
You can elevate humanity. You can be about
Mm.
the children. You can be about community and do more than pay the bills. Right? You
Wow.
can.
You
It's
can.
possible.
It's
Um,
possible.
and I'm glad that we've been able to show that for those personnel, the Wombward family that's been here from the beginning, including the mamas. You know what I mean? Us youngins who are now uh, old heads in our own right, running
Yeah.
the organization, having our kids in it. You know what I mean? So again, the circle of life continues,
Mm-hmm.
and really demonstrating, and this is certainly where my public health focus comes in, showing the intersectionality of arts, culture, and health, and showing that the intentional use of creative energy for health outcomes is impactful.
Yes.
Again, this is the story of my life making sense. The constellation, right?
Right.
Sankofa Dance Theater. I did that, early mid '90s. That exposure to again performing arts of the African diaspora that was contributing to my health.
Yep.
Being a storyteller, learning from Mary Connor Smith, the Griot Circle in Maryland, that was contributing to my health. Woundwork definitely contributing to my health. All the choirs that I was on, all the bands that I was in, all these ways that I was constantly expressing myself creatively were benefiting my health and well-being.
That's it.
They were.
They were.
Um, and when I think about all those entities that were providing these opportunities, how many of them were doing it with the intentional goal of health and well-being? Not as many. Wound work definitely was, but not as many as they could have been, and that's the point. That's part of the point. There are many artists and creators that are doing this for the sake of healing, for the sake of growth, for the sake of all these terms that we use, and believe it or not making the connection to health. Like it's right there. It's right there. And my training in public health allowed me to make the bridge clear. So when when Woundwork's mantra has always been to, heal and empower communities, youth, family, and communities. And explicitly saying the bit to the benefit of social emotional health, even though we said healing, like we just, we said to heal. First couple of words in the mantra. But saying those words, health, has made such a big difference. And
Wow.
part of it is, again, activating the health impact of what a lot of creatives already do. In
Sure.
Baltimore, such a prime example. So many of the artists and creators are doing this to heal from something.
Absolutely.
they're doing it. They're doing it to address some challenge, some
Absolutely.
practice. And it doesn't take more than 1 or 2 degrees of separation to make the connection to public health. That's what my skills have allowed me to do. So
Mm.
being able
So
to,
let me ask a question. So it is a fusion. So what you're doing is like fusing art with public health, like how art definitely puts you in a space of being more healthy and it
absolutely.
contributes to your health, which contributes to public health.
It's
So
the intentionality. That's the biggest thing. It's the intentionality
the
around it. Because
intentionality.
again, Woundwork is doing nothing different than it has been doing for the last decade plus. There's been this focus on virtues, right? Uh,
Absolutely.
the social emotional health that can be benefited with performing arts. So the
Absolutely.
public health part was right there. But it took me going to Hopkins, right, and getting this PhD to say, duh, right? It's like it's right there. It was there the whole time.
Amazing.
And again, serendipity once again in my life. A fellow griot connected me with two women. One is the director of the International Arts and Mind Lab at Johns Hopkins, the School of Medicine, and one at the time was the director, now the research director of the Center for Arts and Medicine at the University of Florida. And when I met with the director at the Center for Arts and Medicine, that's when I first learned that arts, culture, and health was a thing. Like officially a thing. Like there were people who did this intentionally. They
Intentionally.
knew. I found my tribe. That's the way I put it. I found my people. Because all the conversations that I had with people, with other people where they kind of sort of understood what I was talking about,
Exactly.
they understood. They understood even deeper than I did. It was like revelation. It really was a revelation.
So you're telling me, wait a minute. So you're telling me there's actual a tribe of people and actual research so that arts is important to mental health, to public health. So why are schools moving away from arts? Why are we moving towards, just standardized tests and all of these different spaces when we are taking arts away from schools? So if this is actual research, why aren't we using that?
Arts and culture are experiential. They're experiential. That's the fundamental challenge. If you are in a space of creative energy, you get it, you feel it. How do you convey feelings into a research paper?
Wow.
That's the fundamental challenge that people in arts, culture, and health struggle with, because many of us are artists, right? We are creative, so we know from the experiential side, this is what you experience. And I say that my approach is I accept that. I accept that the best way for people to understand the impact, particularly of storytelling in public health, what I do is to be in a space of storytelling. Because I've done this with professors, I've done this with policymakers, I've done this with community members, anybody. When I get you in a space of storytelling, you're going to get it. You're going to understand. No one asked me for a paper. No one asked me to show them the equation. The experience was enough. That was the data. It's hard to do that on a global scale, right? It's hard to do that all the places where you would love to do it. Yes. So the papers, the presentations, they are the best we can do to expand the reach of this experience, but it's not the same.
It's not the same.
So we try within the science, and again, it's working within the existing structure. So science has a socioeconomic, it has a racial context to it. My field of public health was largely constructed by privileged white men. Nobody looking like me when we were building up public health. Certainly the way that I learned it. So that structure, and not just within public health, but within a lot of science, it still exists, where it's just very rigid. If it's not within the box, we don't like it.
That's not it. Yeah,
we don't like it. So many of us are in a way resigned. Like we just get it. Like we understand that, hey, in order to share this gospel, and I will get a little biblical. If we want to share this gospel, we have to do it in a way that those with the platform can understand. So sometimes that means, we have to share this gospel through a research paper, which is not nearly as interesting, but we know that's going to resonate with an audience. We share this gospel through seminars, right, and keynotes. And we share this gospel, especially when we can, by creating the experience itself, like living the gospel, so to speak. Yep. Right. That's the best way. If we're trying to convert someone, live the gospel, right? Don't just read it to them, live it.
Live it.
So that's the best option, but that's not always the available option.
Sure.
So we have to kind of go down the line and say, okay, what's the next best option? And for researchers, that's where the papers come in. That's where the presentations come in. That's where our classes come in. Those are other opportunities to spread the gospel. And I've been grateful to do that at Florida, where I teach occasionally, at Morgan, which is my primary affiliation, and at Johns Hopkins, where I teach 2 classes on storytelling. And I've been so honored and blessed with the students of all manifestations of humanity who, just say thank you for
Mhm.
creating a space where I can tell my story. Like they were looking for it. You know what I mean? It's
Wow.
the people in the wilderness, right? They're
Yeah.
looking for a promised land. And I can just, I'm not saying this is the promised land, but I can direct them. I can direct them. I'm like, you're getting closer, right? And I think more than anything else, it's the comfort, just like I had when I met Dr. Jill Sankey, who was
Hmm.
the director at Florida Center for Arts and Medicine, that I wasn't alone, right? I wasn't alone. I wasn't the only person that figured this out. I wasn't crazy. That there is something to this idea, and there are other people who know exactly how you're feeling and know what you're thinking, and they can help you. And that's what happened to me 5 years ago, and it's been a rocket ship ever since. Once I knew the space that I was truly meant to be in.
Wow. That that's incredible. Wow, that really incredible. So you're in this space. You're an educator now. You're living out the person you should be with when you when it kind of when you're dealing with community from an arts perspective and dealing with health. It's
Mm.
something that is it's a magic merge that I wouldn't even know. I'm honestly, this is amazing, and I know Moonwork does that, but I didn't know to this degree. And you guys are creating new things and new approaches to art and health. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
That's
Oh,
amazing.
yeah, absolutely. And again,
That's
I would say
amazing.
that the biggest thing is just the intentionality by which Woundward does it. So we're glad that coming slowly but surely out of the pandemic, we're able to bring back our youth ensembles, next generation and new generation. So any children out there who are interested, parents of children who are interested in the performing arts, theater, African drumming, storytelling, dance, if you are interested in an orientation in African and indigenous philosophy, if you are interested in social emotional health, we invite you to consider Woundwork Productions. Check out woundwork.com, learn more about what we offer. Uh,
It's
there's
moonwork.com or .org.
woundwork.com. Yeah,
.com. Okay.
WOMBWORK.com. So it continues to grow, and we continue to embrace the opportunities that the organization can create for Black and brown children, for Black and brown communities, for everyone really. And that's the thing, unapologetically Black, but we recognize that everyone needs this love, right? it,
Absolutely.
it ain't
Everybody
race
needs it.
it ain't race exclusive. You know what I mean?
You're right. That's true.
um,
This
but
is art is colorless, and
oh
everyone
yeah,
needs it. Yeah, everyone needs it.
absolutely, absolutely. So, and that's one of the things that I appreciate too. I remember when Woodward used to be, man, ain't nobody want to mess with the good old days. But we continue to mature, right? We mature
Yeah.
as an organization, and again, we see the benefit of what we've always done to so many more, and that continues to grow. Uh, EDOH is an example of that. New generation and next generation continue to be an example of that. The arts instruction that we do in schools around Baltimore and around the state of Maryland are examples of that. So people ask me, how can you possibly do all the things that I do? Well, it's hard. I'll admit that. What makes it somewhat feasible is that everything I do is interconnected. They're all related to each other.
Y'all related.
They all cultivate each other. So I actively think about the links between the entities and the organizations and the spaces that I represent all the time, because I want it to be a collective. The collective works much more strongly than the individual. And I, as one person, do not want to do all this work alone, and I don't. That's why I have the collective, and I want to continue to grow that collective so that they know each other, so that they can appreciate each other, so that they can utilize again the collective skills and talent and wisdom that my networks and my communities represent and present and have. So it's this has been a long, strange, fascinating trip. It continues to be a long, strange, fascinating trip, and I I love this trip. I do. I genuinely love this trip, and I am so grateful that the universe has given me a life of quality. Um, I hope that I'm around for a very long time, but I know that even if I'm not, the impact that I've been able to have on this world is appreciated, is
Hmm.
respected, is understood. That's the story that people will have about David Fakunle, and that's the story that I want them to have. So it can continue to grow. It grows the way that I would want it to. It's a story of freedom. It's a story of love. It's a story of being unapologetic. It's a story of being black. You know what I mean? Black as hell.
Black as hell.
It's my story, and that's what I'm happiest about.
Listen, I am so I just want to say thank you for sharing that journey from East Baltimore to your PhD to being a community steward, the things that you've done in community, you continue to do, and you're building upon, and being the executive director of a Black organization and leading it into 21st century spaces, and you guys just creating spaces for young people and continuing this legacy. I'm just so glad I was able to platform you in this series, the BMoreBLaK Series, to kind of introduce you to the community. I'm not sure if everyone knew about David. I don't even want to say it wrong because I keep saying, what
So
is it? Say it.
Fakunle.
Fakunle. Yeah, David Fakunle. It's just, man, when I want to tell the folks particularly how I met you. I was in a cohort for the Elevation Award, and you came in and told us. First, you taught us a little, of course, and then you on storytelling, and you told us stories, and it was like the best presentation because we got a presentation every month. It was the best, and I remembered you, and I told you that night that I wanted to talk to you, and I wanted you to share some of your genius with the community, and I did not know you were the executive director of BMoreBLaK. So I learned a lot tonight, and art and mental health and physical health and public health. And I'm just really astounded. So keep doing great work in the community. But of course, you have to leave your jewel with us. So
Right.
I want you to inspire us a little. Talk to us. Leave David's jewel.
All right. Well, I'll make sense to close with this story, and it's probably the story I told way back when, and because it just kind of captures it best for me. So here we go. An elder woman was walking through the forest one day, and this elder woman would do it every day. It was in the forest where she found refuge, she found peace, she cultivated her connection with the divine. And it was through the sights, the sounds, the taste, the touch, the smell, all the ambiance that the forest offered her. On this particular pilgrimage, the elder woman came across a stone. And you can imagine that this elder woman has seen many stones in her life, big ones, round ones, jagged ones, shiny ones, smooth ones, rough ones. So, with that collective knowledge of stones, she knew immediately there was something precious about this stone. So, what did she do? She picked the stone up, she put it in her pouch, and she kept walking. As she was continuing on her pilgrimage, she saw a shadow, a figure in the distance, and as it was getting closer to her, she could make out a young man. And as that young man continued to get closer to the elder woman, she could see that this young man had been in some trouble. She could see that this young man looked hungry, he looked tired, he looked thirsty, he looked like he had been in a fight. Whatever life was dealing this young man, he was on the losing side, seemingly in every situation. And the elder woman could see all this with her eyes. The young man finally got within a couple feet of the elder woman, and when he did, he dropped to his knees and he asked her, "Ma'am, do you have anything that I can eat? Do you have anything that I can drink? Do you have a place where I can lay my head? Do you have anything that could tend to my wounds? Ma'am, is there any way that you could help me?" The young man, in the midst of his plea to the elder woman, saw that stone in her pouch. And when his eyes caught gaze of that stone, he was no longer thinking about his hunger. He was no longer thinking about his thirst. He was no longer thinking about his tiredness or his pain. There was only one thing on that young man's mind. And so he asked. "Ma'am, may I have that stone in your pouch?" And without any hesitation, as if she didn't take a single thought at the request of the young man, she went into her pouch, she picked up the stone, she put it in the young man's hand, and she kept walking. And this entire time, she never said a word. So the young man is standing there with the stone and starts walking. The elder woman is already on her way, continuing her pilgrimage. And the young man, while walking, is staring at this stone, and he hasn't taken his eyes off for a second, and he's thinking to himself all the dreams and desires and things that he wants: food, clothing, shelter, peace, all of that. Like he'll get everything because of the stone. That's what he's thinking in his mind. But after a while, young man just stops in his tracks. And you know how you can kind of get lost in a space. He was lost in a space for a while, because in that moment where he stopped, it was like he was uh, transported back into the forest. Like he saw it, he felt it, he heard it, he smelled it. Uh, as he was standing there, he even saw a berry that he could eat. The young man turned around and he ran back in the direction of the elder woman, who was still walking, still enjoying her pilgrimage. When he ran up to the elder woman, this is what he said to her: "Ma'am, I want to give this stone back to you because I want whatever it is inside of you that allowed you to give me this stone so freely."
Wow.
I tell that story because it represents the precious stones of our humanity. We all got them. They can be dusty at times, they can be messy at times, they can be a little jagged, they can be rough, but they're there. When we exercise those stones, our love, our peace, our dedication, our discipline, our thoughtfulness, our compassion, on and on and on and on and on, they shine. And the best thing that we can do with those precious stones is exactly what the elder woman did for that young man: give them away, share them with people, right? Because the true impact is how you can change someone's life by being who you are.
Hmm.
And at the core of who we are is love. That's the point. So if anyone is trying to understand the meaning of life, it's to love and to receive love. That's the point. Because in love, it's every other virtue and manifestation of humanity that you could possibly want. They all operate out of love. So when we think about those existential determinants of health, it is about being acknowledged. It is about being appreciated. It is about being respected. It is about being understood. And it's mostly about being loved. So the way that you give those existential determinants is to do that. Acknowledge people, right?
Right.
Appreciate them, respect them, understand them, and love them.
I love them.
Love them, right? And love looks differently for different people. That's okay. It's still love, right? Love is tolerance, right? Love is patience, right? And you can go to the fruit of the spirit. You can go to the Nguzo Saba, right?
Right.
It's all love. It's all love. So operating with that space, operating with that willingness to love, whether for a moment or for a lifetime, that's what makes life worth it. That's the story that you want to leave people when you go. If
Hmm.
if the main story is love with what you did, you're good. That's the eternal life. There may be another one on the other planes, right? But at least for those who are left behind, that's the eternal life, the story that you leave behind.
That's good stuff, brother. Ashe. That is good stuff. Lead with love. Ah, focus on our humanity. That was great. I appreciate that, brother. I really appreciate you coming on the platform. You blessed us tonight. Plenty of jewels. Plenty of jewels. Keep doing the good work.
Thank
I'm so glad you were a part of this series. I appreciate you. Hope we can stay in touch for sure. Collaborate. I would love to collaborate with Moonwork. We need to talk about that,
you.
bro.
Please do. Of course, please do. Let's do it.
Yeah, we definitely need to talk about that. But listen, you be blessed.
Thank you. You too.
Tonight, guys, we've had our sixth voice in 6 out of 7. One more tomorrow, and we're done. This is the BMoreBLaK Series, where we platform Baltimore, Black Baltimore. And tonight we've had David Fakunle. Did I say it correctly?
Fakunle.
Fakunle. I see. Fakunle. So we've had David Fakunle, who blessed us tonight, the executive director of Woundwork Productions, and also a avid. Well, you're a griot.
Yep, Rios, drummer, professor,
All that.
overall disruptor of the system. Yeah, it's
All of that. All of that.
husband, father, decent overall decent human being.
I love that. Listen, you explain yourself. Guys, go to if you want to see what Woundwork is at, woundwork.com. I put the website in the comments. Check them out. They do take donations. You're 501c3.
Yeah,
So you can donate your time, your money. We have to bless the next generation. And we have to give to our own businesses who are doing amazing things in the community. So David, thank you so much for your genius.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And yeah, we're out of here. Let's get some deuces. Let's get some deuces here. We're gone. Can I get some deuces from? That's right. Black Box, we go. We out here. Good night. Don't go nowhere, David. Good night, Black Boxes.